In the village of Karla, tucked between forgotten forests and roads long erased from maps, there is a well no one drinks from, not because the water is poisoned, but because every night, without fail, just after the moon crests the treetops, the well begins to sing. Not songs, names, always one, always new, and by dawn, that person is dead. Locals don't ask questions anymore. But what happens when the well sings a name that doesn't exist? Or worse, when it sings your name twice? Okay, let's get started now. The return to Carlo. Marva Thorne hadn't seen Carlo since she was 12 years old. Even then, she hadn't missed it. The village always smelled of wet bark and ash, and the air had that heaviness like breath held too long. But now 15 years later she was back, not by choice. Her grandmother, Allawan Thorne, had written only 6 words in the letter. Come now, before your name sings. Maeve thought it a joke. Illahorn always spoke in riddles. Maeve booked a one-way train and walked the rest of the way. The twisted stone houses with moss-furred roofs, and beyond them half swallowed by trees though. But when the third cousin she'd never met died mysteriously the day after receiving a letter from Ila. Now, standing at the edge of the village, she saw the familiar silhouette of the chapel. It hadn't changed. Neither had the way people looked at it, or avoided looking. She entered her grandmother's cottage just as the sun began to dip. The old woman was already sitting by the hearth, as if she'd never left that chair. You're late, Illahorn croaked, and the walls were lined with dried flowers and bundles of sage, some bound with hair. I didn't realize it was urgent, Maeve replied, setting her bag down. Everything is urgent when the well begins to remember. Maeve sat across from her, noticing the room had no mirrors, no clocks. What does that mean? She asked. Illahorn didn't answer. Instead, she pointed toward the window, where the trees shimmered under moonlight, and in that moment, they heard it. A voice, soft, male, ancient, not from the trees, from the well, calling a name, Hollis Marrow. Maeve turned to her grandmother. Who is that? Illahorn stared into the fire. We'll know in the morning. Part 2. Hollis Marrow in the rope that tied nothing by dawn. The name had become truth. Maeve wandered into the square with a shallow breath and a skeptic's heart. But the moment she saw the crowd, she knew the story wasn't just a legend, it was law. There, draped over the edge of the old woodworker's stall, hung Hollis Marrow. His body wasn't mangled, but wrong, bent as if some unseen force had curled him inward. His eyes were open, staring at the sky mout filled with dirt, not foam. And worst of all, his hands were tied behind his back with a rope that led nowhere. It didn't hang from the ceiling. It wasn't tied to anything, it simply ended, as if the sky itself had lowered a noose and then taken its hand away. No one screamed. No one cried. They looked. Who did this? She asked aloud. Then they turned away. Maeve stepped closer, her pulse quick. A girl, no more than 11, answered without looking up. The well did. I saw him. You mean someone used the well to threaten him or scare him or Hollis? He's dead. Back at the cottage, Allawan was steeping herbs in silence. Maeve stood at the threshold. I know, Illahorn whispered. The well sang his name. Upon it lay a crumbling leather-bound book, its cover charred at the corners. A line was etched into the wood beneath it. Inside were rows upon rows of names, written in looping script, some crossed out, some faded beyond recognition. But the dates beside them, each marked the night of a name and the morning of a death. That's not possible, Illahorn snapped. No, the well is not a warning. It is a verdict. The name it sings always dies. That night, he swallowed his own tongue while laughing at his own joke. It might as well have been whispering in her ear. She placed a steaming mug in Maeve's hand and gestured to the wooden table. To silence the name. Forget the face. Maeve opened the book. I was 16 when the well sang my father's name, Illahorn murmured. Maeve looked up. He didn't believe it either. Told the village to drown the voice with laughter. She leaned forward. We are not cursed. We are chosen to listen. That night Maeve sat awake beside the open window. The well was a mile away, past the bramble ridge and the bone path, but when it sang, and then, just as the moon touched its peak, it came again. A different name. This time a woman's. Katrine Lowes. Maeve froze. Who is that? From the shadows, Illahorn replied without hesitation. My sister. Part 3. The memory of Katrine. Maeve didn't sleep that night. How could she? The name hung in the air like frost, refusing to melt. Katrine Lowes, her grandmother's sister. Someone Maeve had never heard mentioned before, not once, in 27 years. When dawn crept in, grey and unfeeling, Maeve found Allawan in the kitchen already dressed, already mourning. We should go, the old woman said. Where? To see the end of her song. They found Katrine's cottage on the northern slope, tucked into the mist like a secret too ashamed to breathe. It was untouched by time curtains, still laced, chimney cold but proud, but the door hung open, not broken, as if Katrine had stepped out for tea and never returned. Inside, the scent of rosemary lingered. Then Maeve saw her. Katrine sat in a rocking chair, eyes open, lips parted slightly, as if she'd been about to speak. There was no blood, no violence, just a stillness to complete, too unnatural. One hand rested on her chest, and carved into the skin above her heart was a single word. Listen. Marv backed away, bile rising. What does this mean? Elowyn didn't answer. She stepped forward, knelt by the corpse, and whispered something Marv couldn't hear. Then, from her pocket, Elowyn pulled a small, blackened stone and placed it in Catherine's hand. As soon as the fingers closed around it, a gust of wind blew through the house, but the windows were shut. Back at the cottage, Marv exploded. You knew she was going to die. You didn't warn her. I did, Elowyn replied, calmly. Every year since the war. I warned her. I begged her to return to the circle. What circle? Elowyn looked at her like she'd asked about the sky. The keepers. Those who don't run from the names. Those who carry the record. The ones who make sure the songs are heard. Maeve's voice trembled. And now that includes me. No, Elowyn said. Now it must be you. That night Marv stood at the edge of the path that led to the well. She could see it now, a black hole in the earth, rimmed with moss and old nails. And then the song came again. But something changed. The voice no longer sang a single name. It sang two. Fiona Deeves. And Marve Thorne. Maeve's knees buckled. From behind her. Part 4. When the well sang to the lantern, hit the stones and shattered. Oil bleeding into the dirt. Flames licking low but bright. It was the only light Maeve could see, because after the name left the air, hers and another, it felt as if the night itself had gone blind. Fiona Deeves and Marve Thorne. Not one death, but two. Not a verdict, but an invitation. Elowyn staggered toward her, grabbing Marvy by the shoulders. Eyes wide with a panic, Maeve had never seen, not even that morning with Catherine's body still warm. This is not supposed to happen. Maeve tore away. Why me? Why her? But Elowyn wasn't listening. She was whispering to herself now. Something in an older, tongue, broken rhythm of syllables that made Maveb's ears ring. That only happens once every 3 generations. And then Elowyn said, the well has begun to echo. Maeve didn't sleep again. Instead, she opened the record book, the one with the crumbling spine and the ancient names. And there, near the middle, she saw it, a smudged entry, dated October 12, 1831. 2 names, written side by side. Then a line scratched beneath them so hard the paper tore. Eleanor Thorne, Corwin Deeves. She looked up sharply. Elowyn, was there ever a Fiona Deeves? Silence, then the answer. Her blood remembers. Even if no one else does. The town square was quiet, but not still. People murmured in doorways, eyes flitting toward the chapel, the woods, and always the well. Maeve walked without purpose, unsure whether she was trying to escape or confront a thing that now knew her name. Then she saw a girl, 16 maybe, pale, wide-eyed, and standing far too close to the well's moss-covered edge. Her eyes weren't fearful, they were empty. She didn't move when Maeve approached. Fiona? Marv asked softly. The girl turned slowly. I heard the song, she said, but it wasn't scary. It was like someone saying my name the way it was meant to be said. She explained nothing, but lit it with a match soaked in oil and rosemary. Maeve shivered. You need to come with me. Fiona didn't resist, but she looked back at the well. He's still down there, she whispered. The one who sings. That night Elowyn placed a black candle in the window. The echo doesn't choose randomly, she said. It calls bloodlines together, and when it sings twice, it means the cycle is breaking, or starting again. Maeve sat on the edge of her bed, Fiona sleeping in the next room. Is there any way to stop it? Elowyn's silence spoke volumes, but then soft like breath on stone the song came again. This time the name was not new, not forgotten. It was someone who died already. Katrine Lowes. Part 5. When the dead are named again, the name whispered from the well had no place in the present. Katrine Lowes, she was already dead. Maeve had seen her body, still and carved, her skin marked with a word no one should wear. Listen. But now the well was calling her name again. Maeve stood frozen in the candlelight, unable to speak. Is it broken? She finally whispered. Elowyn's hands trembled. She didn't look up. No, it's remembering. Remembering what? The old woman's face was pale as stone. The voice inside the well is not a single thing. It is made of names, and some names never fully die. The next morning Maeve found Fiona gone, her bed unslept in, the blanket folded, the door left open, and on the table where the book of names once lay, a small object sat in its place, a toothed human, child-size, still red at the root. Marv ran to the well. No one stopped her. She stood at the edge, wind whipping her coat, looking down into the blackness. Fiona, nothing. A shift, not a sound, but a feeling as if the well hadn't hailed. Then came a voice not from below, but from inside her own chest. She is listening now. Elowyn found Marv still there. Hours later, lips blue, eyes wild. You need to come back, she said gently. You're standing too close. Maeve turned slowly. It spoke through me. Elowyn didn't flinch. That's how it begins. She led her back to the cottage, where a fire burned and a book lay opened out, the one of names, but a different one. A book with no title, No cover, only pages made of stitched animal skin, inked in dark red, and wrapped in a symbol Mave couldn't decipher. What is this? Ilowin's voice was low. The true ledger, the one we don't write in with pens, but with memory. As if someone was reading to her, someone sitting very, very close. Maeve flipped through it. The words weren't English, but her eyes seemed to understand. And on the final page, freshly written, Fiona Deeves, awakened Catherine Lowes, remembered Maeve Thornkeeper, Bearlight Wet. That night Maeve couldn't sleep. The silence was too loud. She sat by the hearth, staring at the embers, when she heard it again, not the well, but footsteps. She turned. Fiona stood at the door, soaked, shivering, eyes. Wrong. I went below, she said, voice thin and hollow. Marv ran to her. You're alive. Fiona stepped back. I'm not sure. ChatGPT said. DIY la fan 6ca Kuchbin. The well that sings the dead's names. A new one every night. Part 6. The girl who came back wrong. Fiona stood motionless in the doorway, rain still dripping from the ends of her hair, puddling beneath her bare feet. Her dress clung to her skin like it no longer belonged to her. Maeve stared. Where have you been? Fiona's lips moved, but it wasn't her voice that answered. The place under the place. The root beneath the well. He showed me. Maeve stepped closer, hesitant. Fiona, it's me. It's Mav. I remember you. For a heartbeat Fiona blinked, and her gaze sharpened. Relief surged in Maeve's chest, but it faded just as quickly when Fiona added. You were there last time. They brought her inside. He lives in the silence beneath it, in the hunger between songs. Elowan said nothing. She simply wrapped Fiona in an old wool blanket, poured a cup of tea, and watched. Fiona didn't drink, didn't shiver. She simply stared at the fire and whispered, he doesn't live in the water. Maeve sat across from her. What did you see? Fiona's voice dropped to a whisper. Not what. Who? Later that night, Maeve searched through Elowan's books, desperate for answers. In one, she found a passage written in the margin, barely legible. When the well sings a dead name, the veil thins. That which listens begins to speak. Maeve returned to the room where Fiona now slept, but she wasn't sleeping. Her lips moved silently, over and over. She stood beside the window, facing the woods. Maeve crept closer, and as she listened, she realized Fiona was speaking names. Dozens of them. None she recognized. Until Maeve Thorn. Fiona turned slowly. He wants to give you a gift. The next morning the villagers gathered at the well, not in fear, but in expectation. A man stood at the front, tall, pale, unfamiliar. Mav asked Elowan. The old woman's face turned to stone. He was named last winter. Maeve's blood ran cold. Then he should be dead. Elowan nodded. He is even the names that walk again. The man by the well wore Sunday closed, to clean for the mud, to crisp for the weather. His skin, though, told the truth. It had the flat sheen of the recently buried. His lips curled into a smile too wide, as if he had practiced it on a corpse. Maeve couldn't look away. That's not a man, she said softly. That's a name. The villagers didn't flee. They didn't scream. They bowed, one by one, heads dipped in eerie silence. A kind of reverence. Her mouth opened as if to explain, but no words came. Instead, she raised her hand and pointed not at the well, but at Maeve's chest, as if this thing was not only welcome but expected. Elowan whispered through gritted teeth. He was the last to be sung before the long silence. Back then, we thought the well was empty, but it wasn't. It was waiting. Maeve pulled Fiona aside, but the girl's hands were cold and stiff. You're next, Fiona whispered, but not to die. To remember. That night Elowan locked every door, sealed every window with chalk and herbs. She lit black candles and spoke in tongues forgotten by the chapel. Maeve Watts, shaken. Tell me what's happening. Elowan didn't stop her chance. Tell me, Maeve cried. The old woman finally looked up. The dead have names. The well is their voice. But sometimes, they forget who they were. And when they forget, they come back looking. Elowan's hands trembled as she drew a mark on Maeve's forehead. For the one who remembers them. At midnight, the singing began again. But it wasn't a name. It was a chant, a chorus, layered voices, high and low, young and ancient, calling from inside the stones, not just the water. Maeve stood at the cottage window and saw the villagers forming a circle around the well. They were all humming, not forced, not afraid. In worship, Fiona stood among them, barefoot, eyes white. The man from the well turned slowly and looked directly at Maeve. He lifted one hand and tapped his throat. It's your turn, she heard. Inside the cottage, the record book began to bleed. Not metaphor. Red droplets seeped from the leather, forming a name on the floorboards. Mave Thorn beneath it. A second name appeared, slowly, as if something was writing from underneath the wood. Corwin Deeves, Marv gasped. That's the one from 1831. The double name. Elowan nodded grimly. It's not repeating. It's finishing. Part 8. The descent. Beneath the name, the night swallowed sound. Even the insects had gone quiet. The trees held their breath. Only the humming continued, soft now, distant as if the ground itself vibrated with remembrance. Maeve stood before the well. Alone, the villagers had dispersed at dawn, their eyes dull, their mouths silent. Fiona was nowhere to be found. Elawan, too, had vanished, leaving behind only a circle of ash and a single word etched into the cottage table. Gomave didn't pack anything. She brought only the record book, now stained through with her name and another's, Corwin Deves. The lid of the well was gone, just stones now old, wet, uneven. At the edge, she found a rope ladder, ancient but intact, coiled loosely like a serpent waiting to strike. Below her, the blackness was total except for one thing, then began to descend. But when her feet touched the well's floor, Mavi realized there was no water. The air shifted after the fifth rung. It smelled not of earth, but of memory, iron, rosemary, and candle wax. A faint red glow. The deeper she went, the clearer it became, a soft pulsating light from beneath the water. The glow came from the stones, thousands of them, and at the very center, one stone stood taller, smooth as bone, and carved with two perfect lines, each etched with a name. Some were shallow and worn, others were fresh. Corwin Deves Mavathon. A chill passed through her spine. Simply old, but no longer in borrowed skin. This time, he wore nothing but smoke and silence. "Why me?" she whispered. From behind her, a voice replied, not cruel, not kind. "Because you remember what others buried." She turned. There he stood, the man from the square. His face was blurred, as though unfinished. His eyes were not eyes, but empty as sockets filled with singing. "I was forgotten," he said. They drifted forward, mouthing silent words, but my name never stopped echoing. And now, it has found its harmony. Maeve gripped the book. "You died in 1831, he nodded. Maeve took a step back. "Fiona Lowen, what did you do to him?" He gestured around the chamber, and there, from the walls, figures began to move. Not corpses, not ghosts, but echoes, shadow versions of every name the well had ever sung. "You are the last keeper," he said, "and you will remember us all." Maeve felt the record book grow hot in her hands. The ink inside bled across the pages, rewriting itself. Each letter twisted until the entire book read only one sentence, over and over. "Memory is the only grave." Part 9, the last verse. Maeve stood in the chamber of names, surrounded by echoes, each flickering like candlelight trapped in human form. They didn't breathe, they didn't speak, but they watched, and behind them, the figure of Corwin Deves waited, the air around him pulsing with some ancient rhythm that did not belong to this century. Maeve tightened her grip on the book. "You want me to sing, don't you?" she asked. Corwin's voice was almost tender. "No, I want you to remember." The record book vibrated in her hands. The ink kept shifting, pages dissolving and reforming, writing not just names, but entire lives, births, deaths, betrayals, regrets. Each page contained the soul of someone the world had let vanish. Lovers turned to soil. Children whose names were whispered only once. Maeve felt the weight of it crush her lungs. "What happens if I do this?" she asked. Corwin stepped forward. "Then the well will rest, and the names will sleep. We will not haunt the living, because the living will carry us." She looked up. "And if I don't," he smiled, "then we'll sing louder and louder, until even the stones forget how to stay silent." Maeve turned away. The record book throbbed like a second heart. Her own heartbeat staggered beneath its rhythm. The faces around her began to fade, not in fear but in sorrow. That's when she saw her. Fiona, standing across the chamber, no longer a puppet. Her eyes were her own. "You don't have to sing," Fiona said. "You just have to choose what not to forget." Maeve stepped to the center of the chamber. She placed the record book on the tall stone marked with her name and Corwin's. Then she pulled from her coat something Alawan had left behind. Soaked in rosemary oil, she struck it. The flame caught the book instantly. The names burned, turned to smoke, and lifted. Corwin screamed not in anger, but in mourning. The echo shrieked and swirled as the chamber filled with heat and ash. "You don't own memory," Maeve said. "You only haunt what we refuse to carry." The chamber began to collapse, stone by stone, syllable by syllable. As the roof fell in and the light faded, Maeve closed her eyes. Above her, the well breathed out one final note, a soft hum. No name, just silence. Part 10. The keeper without a song. Morning came. A gray, shapeless dawn spread over the village. Mist draped the fields like old linen. The wind carried no birds, only a strange, deliberate stillness, the kind that follows a scream too ancient to echo. Maeve stood alone in the square. The well was gone. Not sealed, not destroyed. Gone. Where it had stood, nothing but grass, soft and slightly sunken, like a scar under healed skin. No breath, no memory calling her back. Fiona was there, sitting on the chapel steps. Her eyes were clear, her face pale, but alive. "Did it end?" she asked. Maeve nodded. "For them, mate." Fiona reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object. The tooth. She placed it in Maeve's palm. "You might still need it," she said. Maeve closed her fingers around it. The dead hadn't left her. They had simply stopped singing. Over the following days, the The villagers stirred slowly back to life. No one spoke of what had happened. No one mentioned the well, or the songs, or the man with a name that never died. It was as if they had never remembered at all. But Maeve did. She saw their faces, not as phantoms, but as people. Whole, flawed, forgotten. At night, she still dreamed of names not sung, but written in ash, and she wrote them down. Not in blood, not in cursed leather, but in a plain notebook, with a pencil, page after page. Not for magic, not for ritual, just memory. One evening a traveler passed through the village. He asked Maeve where he might find a place to rest. She pointed him toward the inn. Before he left, he asked, "Strange question, Miss, but I heard once there was a singing well in these parts. Know anything about that? But I know some names you might like to hear." Maeve paused, smiled. No. She opened the notebook and began to read. And so the well sings no more. But perhaps the memory remains. Not in magic, not in whispers, but in you, the last listener. If this story echoed somewhere inside you, even for a moment, leave a like to let us know you're still listening. Subscribe for more journeys into the forgotten, the forbidden, and the quietly horrifying corners of our past. And remember, some stories don't end. They wait. Until next time, sleep with one ear open.